It has finally happened. The Indians have traded Francisco Lindor. He is headed to the Big Apple, but he is not going to the Yankees. He's going to the New York Mets. Let's take a look at the trade. Lindor and Carrasco go to the Mets for Ahmed Rosario. He's a shortstop with major league experience. Andres Jimenez, also a shortstop, has played in the big leagues. Josh Wolf, a pitcher that is considered a top 10 prospect for the Mets. Isaiah Green, an outfielder, also top 10 prospect in the Mets organization. The trade saves the Indians $64 million in payroll. Chris Antonetti, Vice President of Baseball Operations, or President of Baseball Operations rather, explains the Indians' trade.
Obviously, trades like this are really tough, not only when you're trading players that are extraordinary competitors and extraordinary contributors on the field, but are even better people off the field. And in both players' cases, in Carlos and Francisco's case, they've had a huge impact in our on-field success over the course of the last, better part of the last decade. We feel like this is another trade in which we were able to bring back players that will help us sustain our competitiveness, not only in 2021, but in the future. We'll bring back two players that can contribute to our major league team immediately, and will be here for the foreseeable future, and added some depth to our farm system with two prospects that we think have a chance to develop into good players. So this is another example of us trying to make sure that we actively manage our roster, actively manage our finances in order to stay competitive and continue the run of success that we've had over the last 8 years.
Chris Antonetti, President of Baseball Operations, and the Indians save about $44 million in payroll between trading what Lindor would have got in arbitration and Carrasco's salary. They now have the lowest salary in Major League Baseball. Let's welcome in Anthony Castrovince. He is a national writer for MLB.com. And Anthony, you told us it was not a matter of if Lindor was going to be traded. It was when. He was traded now. How did they do with what they got in return?
Well, this was a fair value in this market, in these conditions, for Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. The problem, of course, is that fair value in these conditions does not nearly align with the value, fans place on star talents like this. These are beloved ball players. Francisco Lindor is the magnetic face, or was the magnetic face, of this franchise. Carlos Carrasco is one of the more beloved players that I've ever covered here in Cleveland. And brings tremendous value to a rotation. So yeah, there's a lot of fans understandably looking at this and going, where's the rest? That it looks a little light, but when you understand baseball's market right now, and you mentioned the money that was moved in this deal, so many teams scaling back, with Lindor a year away from free agency, with Lindor coming off a very non-Lindor year, and with so many shortstops in next winter's free agent market, so many high caliber shortstop, Carlos Correa, Corey Seager, Trevor Story, Javier Baez, and Lindor. This constitutes fair value.
And important to note, you were an Indians beat reporter a number of years ago. You're a Northeast Ohio native. You're very familiar with the franchise. When you look at that, is this a flat-out rebuild now? I mean, when you look at, I know you have Shane Bieber and you have some really good young pitching, but the lineup struggled as it was last year with Santana and Lindor to score runs. They were one of the bottom feeders as far as scoring runs. Now you're struggling to find major league bats in that lineup.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that would prevent me from calling this a full-on rebuild is the presence they have, at the top of the rotation with Shane Bieber being a Cy Young winner and Zach Plesac, the development we've seen there, Aaron Savali. I mean, they have quality pitching, which, when you have that as a backbone, you could be good in a hurry. But there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is as close to a full-scale rebuild as we've seen in the last decade with this club. Baseball has changed a lot to where the quote-unquote rebuild is not what it used to be. It's not the and some franchises have had a 20-year process of rebuilding and trying to build a championship window. You can do it quicker now. The game has gotten younger. Prospects are promoted faster. And the Indians have a really strong farm system. It's stronger, particularly in the lower levels, and and this deal adds to those lower levels with the two prospects they received in this deal. But it can turn around quicker. But there's no question about it that this major league product for 2021, nobody's gonna be counting this club as a contender.
When you look at across the landscape of baseball, how well respected is the Indians' development? I mean, it seems like they develop starting pitching like nobody's business. I mean, there's 3 or 4 guys every year that you're going, where did he come from? And he comes up and they stick him in, and whenever he starts, he wins.
Yeah, and I want to amend something I just said, where I said nobody's going to be counting them as a contender, and that's true. But we also do have to see the rest of the offseason plays out, yada, yada, yada. I have to add those addendums because with the significant savings for 2021, I expect them to have a low payroll. I don't know that they'll have the lowest payroll in baseball in 2021. So we will see what comes from this financial flexibility they've granted themselves with this deal, because there's clear needs in the outfield. But to your point about the development, they've been fantastic at developing arms, less fantastic at developing bats. And even in some cases where they've tried to identify, young bat from other systems. I mean, Jake Bowers comes to mind from the deal a couple of years back that brought Carlos Santana back to Cleveland. That's a deal that just hasn't panned out to date. So that's where they're short, clearly is in position player bats, particularly outfield bats. And you'll notice that there are no present day major league outfielders in this Lindor deal. So that has a lot of people shaking or, scratching their heads. But, that is an important element of this deal, is the financial flexibility. And, maybe they use that to go get an outfielder in free agency. We just have to see how the rest of this offseason plays out.
Do you expect them to be, at least involved somewhat, in the lower level? They're certainly not going to go out and spend a boatload of money on somebody, because if they were willing to do that, Lindor would still be here. But do you expect them to sign some of the lower level free agents to at least make the offense somewhat competitive?
Yeah, and there's a lot of inventory in this free agent market. There's just a lot of players, period, and there's not a lot of spending going on in the industry right now. The Mets have been one of the more aggressive teams in baseball. They signed James McCann to a 4-year, $40 million deal, and that's more than any team combined, has signed on any players combined. And now on top of that, they've done this deal. So it's a marketplace that's still very much developing. There's a lot of movement to come, but it's going to be suppressed prices just because of, supply and demand factors. So, there could be some bargain bin ads to be had there. You look at like a Cesar Hernandez signing from last year. I mean, maybe a player of that nature, that good little ball player they were able to add on the cheap. And by the way, they might try to bring him back as well. But so yeah, it's developing as all things in our world right now. The baseball free agent market very much developing, and still a lot of questions left to be answered.